Welcome back to What You Will Learn. My name is Adam Ashton.
And my name is Adam Jones. Today we're taking you through the best bits of Hell Yeah or No by Derek Sivers. What's worth doing?
The first ever episode we did of the podcast was Anything You Want by Derek Sivers. So we've come around for another one of his books. He, I guess, got really famous off that idea of Hell Yeah or No. We're going to go into some of the more nuance around what's worth doing. It's not just saying hell yeah or no to everything. It's a specific tool in a specific circumstance.
Much like Anything You Want, it's a pretty small book with a lot of little bangers that have got a bit of a punch from a philosophical angle, business angle, and a whole bunch of different angles, I guess. So as a little story to kick us off, Derek Sivers, he told his old life coach that he really wanted to start a new company. The coach, he said, "Look, Derek, no, you don't." Sivers said, "Yeah, I do. Come on, mate. This is really important to me." But the coach said, "No, it's not. Saying something doesn't make it true."
Yeah, Sivers says, look, you can't just ignore what I'm saying. I know myself. I know myself well. I know what I want to do, and I'm telling you that this is really important to me. And the coach says, yeah, I'm going to ignore what you say because I'm just going to look at your actions, because our actions reveal our true values. And Sivers pondered it for a while, and he was thinking, well, I suppose it is true. A lot of people say they want to learn a new language but never do. They say they want to start a new business but they never start. They say they want to quit smoking but they haven't quit yet. What's going on? And so the coach says, if you really want to do something, then you're probably going to do it.
So no matter what you say, it doesn't really matter about that because your actions is what really reveals the truth. And there are two smart reactions to this. Firstly, you can stop lying to yourself and just admit what your real priorities are. Or you can start doing what you say you want to do and see if it's actually true.
So basically, the rest of this episode, we're going to talk about those two things. We're going to either prompt you to change the things that you say that you want to do, or we're going to actually say, well, go and do them and find out. Man, I used to absolutely hate capsicum. Absolutely hate it. And it was one of those things that if there was one small square centimeter of capsicum, I used to say the whole meal tastes like capsicum. Mum tried to be clever. She tried to sneak it in. She wanted to, a bit healthy, to eat a few more veggies. So I used to love spaghetti bolognese, and she tried to sneak in just a few little slithers of capsicum, but I could always taste it, and it would really tick me off because she just ruined a perfectly good meal. But then one day I was at a party and a mate brought out just like dips with just wedges of capsicum. And I thought, well, that's a weird thing to do, but I was a bit peckish, so I grabbed a wedge of capsicum, put a bit of dip on it, chomped down. I thought, actually, it tastes pretty good.
So you've changed a fair bit there, actually, compared to what that was. I was a bit the same when it came to corn. Slightly different. I used to be quite neutral with corn. And then when I went to live in Turkey for 6 months on exchange, they started just putting corn in everything, like your eggs in the morning and everything like that. And the only two words I remember from Turkish, please correct me, anyone listening from Turkey, but tidak misir. It's like no corn. By the end of it, I absolutely hate corn compared to what I did before Turkey.
Too funny. Basically, I guess what we're saying is that you change over time. The things that you used to love, you can grow to hate. The things you used to hate, you can grow to love. And, I used to cling to this thing that I hated capsicum, but now I'm like, actually, capsicum's pretty good. I had a capsicum for breakfast, and it's just one of those things that we can change. And, of course, they're pretty trivial examples, but our other interests change as well over time.
Derek Sivers, for example, the author, at one stage he called himself an entrepreneur because he definitely was. He grew his company CD Baby in the early 2000s and famously sold it for over $30 million. I reckon you could roll around calling yourself an entrepreneur.
Yeah, you get at least a decade of calling yourself an entrepreneur if you sell your company for tens of millions.
Much more than a lot of the other people on Instagram.
They call themselves an entrepreneur.
Entrepreneur. Haven't sold shit yet. But then eventually after 10 years, he realized, oh, hang on, can I keep calling myself that? I've had 10 years without doing anything to do in business. Obviously, at some point, you can no longer hold that same title you used to have, particularly if you're not earning it like you used to.
Yeah, he says the title that you call yourself, you need to keep earning it, and there is like an expiration date. For him, when he realized that he hadn't started a new company for 10 years, he struggled to call himself an entrepreneur. It's a bit like the 55-year-old midlife crisis bloke who was the quarterback in high school, who's still living off that fame, who's still calling himself an athlete, even though he's 20 or 30 pounds overweight, and he probably hasn't got above a slow jog for a long time.
Yeah, sitting next to the steam room next to Warwick Kappa, a very famous AFL superstar, and chatting to him and only living back through his heydays and I think he was high on cocaine when I was sitting next to him. And anyway, which is a big sidebar, but just an example of people just clinging to those old things.
Yeah, you really need to stop fooling yourself. Whatever titles you call yourself, whether it's obviously an official title at work, but also just a more casual title, if you call yourself a musician or an athlete or a swimmer or a business person or whatever you call yourself, if you haven't done it for a long time, you got to think if you can still call yourself that. You got to be very clear and very honest about what was in the past and what is in the present.
Now, the element that we've all got that defines who we are today and is going to predict what our title is going to be in the future, it all comes down to our character.
So Derek Sivers, he used to work in the music industry in New York, but after a while he left. Obviously, as we said, he built up his business. Then he went and lived and traveled in different countries all over the world. He went back to New York about 15 years later, got the old gang back together of all the people he used to work with, and he found that pretty much every single person ended up exactly where he expected, in the sense that the people who were disciplined, they achieved success. The people who were a bit temperamental, they flamed out. The people who exhibited a bit of leadership back then, they were now leaders. The ones who blamed the world for all their problems, they were still blaming the world for all their problems. So he said it didn't matter if they were the unpaid intern at the bottom of the rung. If they showed good character and good intent and good discipline and worked hard, they actually ended up achieving success. And of course, the ones who were already famous at the time, if they seemed a bit fragile, everything came tumbling down. So the character was what predicted their future.
If you've ever been to a 10-year reunion at your school, you probably would have experienced this exact same thing. I had mine a few years ago. Have you had yours yet, Ash Joe?
It was last year, cancelled for COVID. Hopefully postponed, not cancelled, hopefully.
But yeah, I think most people would find this exact same thing, right? Like the ones who are working really hard, maybe a bit geeky at school, and then you got your jocks who are just bullying all the geeks. Well, the tables turn big time 10 years later and the geeks have the last laugh.
Yeah, so this character is absolutely vital. And thankfully, character, it's not something you're born with. It's not set in stone. It's not fixed by your DNA. Character is really a choice. And it's probably a better description. It's the combination or the accumulation of all of the little choices you make and all those little steps that you take. So the small actions we take change our character, and then our character determines where we end up. So doing small things like saying yes when someone asks for volunteers, or approaching a famous person and introducing yourself, or just reading a book, listening to a podcast, taking a course, opening yourself to new ideas, all of these small little actions contribute to the character that you take on.
After you take this initial step, you'll start viewing yourself as you've taken that action. So if you do something that is a little bit scary, you'll actually start taking on the identity and character of brave. Or if you actually complete something that you thought was difficult, you might start calling yourself and seeing yourself as an achiever. And as you iterate with these small actions, it's a positive feedback loop to developing a new character, which is really going to determine what your future is going to be. Once we get on a roll of the path we're going in, the subconscious mind just gets in its loop. Time absolutely flies by, and the years go and the years go. But we never really catch ourselves sitting there and going, you know, why am I doing what am I doing? Having said that, I don't know if I've ever asked that. It's probably a good time after this segment.
Yeah, sometimes we ask, you know, what are we doing? What are we going to do next? We very rarely stop to think, why are we actually doing that? Often we're just guided by social pressures and social norms. They're extremely powerful. They send us down specific paths or specific actions or specific trajectories or lifestyles or journeys, but we never really consciously think about them. And if we don't stop to think, then we just end up going along with the herd and going along with everybody else expects us to do.
Powerful idea. One day you will be on your deathbed and you will be breathing your last breaths and you'll be gasping and you'll be thinking, shit. Maybe that's an understatement, but you'll be thinking, shit, right? Like, imagine that feeling of regret looking back and never asking that question, why am I doing it? You just hurtled along like this bloke on a horse just running into the just where the horse wanted to go kind of thing. You never actually taken in the reins of your life and choosing the direction that you want yourself.
Yeah, he says if you want to make a lot of money, that's fine, but just admit that that's why you're doing it. If you want to be famous, pursue that and admit that maybe being famous means you don't make a lot of money, but you're the person in the limelight. Or if you want to make a lot of money, maybe it means you are taking a back step and you're not going to be famous. There's all these things you got to just admit to yourself. What do you actually want to do, not just what does everybody else think you should do?
We have to know and understand our own preferences as well, our own little quirks and differences compared to everyone else, because these are the things that make us who we are. And this is what we need to protect from all those social pressures to conform.
And you also got to remember, whatever you pick, whether it's money, whether it's status, whether it's fame, whatever it is you pick, someone is always going to say that you're wrong for picking that thing. Someone's always going to say, why are you doing this? You should be doing something else. So ahead of time, you got to realize that not everyone's going to agree with your choices.
So you need to expect this criticism in advance. So say, for example, your family might value something else, or your friends, and they want to go out for all these family dinners and these boutique restaurants and things like that. And you're thinking, no, I just want to go out and get a kebab. This just sounding pretty specific, isn't it? This happened about 3 weeks ago. Obviously, you're going to get, you might cop a little bit for not being all about the bouginess and just going out and get a cheesy kebab. But if that's how you want to live and have your own quirks, expect this criticism in advance, because it's just going to be a little collateral damage for living your own uniqueness.
Okay, so we've said that we shouldn't just be going along with the herd, and we shouldn't just be conforming to all of the social pressures. You need to take a step back and ask yourself why. What are your greater purposes or your reasons for doing what you're doing? So how do we actually go about trying to work out, well, what should we be doing? How do we choose something that we should be doing?
The obvious option's always there. It's the conformist one. You just go along with what everyone else wants you to do. But really, the world, it's got this smorgasbord of ideas and different paths that we can always be choosing. And there's always this opportunity cost as well of not choosing all the alternative options. So there's a whole bunch that we're not just seeing right now.
Yeah, it's very funny when someone says, oh, I've got to do this, I've got no other choice. But you've always got a choice. Sivers says, well, at least you can add 2 more to that list. One is do nothing. That's an obvious one that you can add to the list. He also says is go crazy by feeling that you have to do something and you don't want to do it. That's another one to add to the list. He also says if someone says, oh, I've got 2 options, A or B, it means they got stuck. They thought of 2 things and then they stopped thinking about new ones. They just started comparing the pros and cons. He says there's always a shitload of choices.
I think the most common one is people thinking, oh yeah, should I be sticking in my job or quitting my job or changing to job? So, there's maybe 3 different options, and it's pretty common in this circumstance to see nothing else that's on the table.
Yeah, exactly. If you might just think, I hate my job, so I want to quit and start a business. And you think, I've got 2 options. 1, quit and start the business. 2, give up on the business and just say, I just got to cop it. I just got to stay in this job. So you think your 2 options is either stay in the job or quit and start a business. But of course, there's a whole bunch of different options that you could do. 1 is you can work during the day and start the business at night. 1 is you can show up to work but actually work on your business until you get caught. 1 is to make a proposal to the big boss to say, hey, I've got this idea, let's start it as a new division, so you're effectively keeping the job and getting paid to start your business. 1, just do nothing. Do neither. Just go to South America, live cheap, go to the beach, become a wilderness guide. So there's a whole bunch of different options that don't just become A or B.
Go wild. And that second one, they're show up to work but secretly work on your business all day. I think of a few extra people doing that, especially in the coronavirus pandemic. And if you read a few productivity books to just get the shit you're meant to do done anyway.
Tick that off and then start doing some other stuff as well.
But not me, of course.
No, neither of us, obviously. A whole bunch of great insight can come from opening your mind to all these different options. If you give yourself like an hour to just brainstorm all these different ideas, if you ever come to a decision and say, oh, I've got to do A or B, I don't know what I want to do, that's pretty much a clear sign that you've stopped thinking about other options. If you give yourself an hour to think of all the other options that are on the table, it turns these painful, forced either or dilemmas into something much more enjoyable.
One of the risks of actually inventing all these options is that it actually gets hard to actually move in some kind of direction and be somewhat decisive. Sivers says, don't be a donkey. And a metaphorical donkey we're talking about now, this is based on one of Aesop's fables, Bertien's donkey. And this is where you got one that's standing halfway between a pile of hay and halfway between a bucket of water. Keeps looking left and right, trying to decide between hay or water, and unable to decide, eventually it dies of hunger and thirst. Man, that reminds me of the footy pie.
That's exactly what I was thinking.
Really? Oh, that's hilarious. So we actually had the same thought. But anyone in Australia remember that ad where you got, you tell it, Asho.
Oh, no, that's basically it. Footy pie. What do you want? Do you want footy or pie? And the poor bloke decides to eat the footy. And that's
Just panics.
But basically, like this donkey, if you got 2 options, hay or water, and it dies of hunger and thirst, the donkey's not thinking of the future. Obviously, all the donkey needs to do, go over and nibble on the hay first, and then go and drink the water, and he's both fed and what's the opposite of fed? Drunk. His thirst has been quenched. Yeah.
Quenched.
But so Sivers says that we often act like donkeys. You might think if you're 30 years old and you've got 6 different things you want to do, 6 different big projects, you think, well, I've got to do them all at once. I can't decide which one I want to do. Sivers says, well, just pick one, do it for 10 years, and then pick the second one, do it for 10 years. And by the time you turn 90, you've done all 6 for 10 years each. So it's not saying, like, you can plan ahead. You can think to the future. You don't have to do all 6 at once. Just do one first and then the next one later. Just like the donkey, we can go and eat the hay first and then go and get the water.
Yeah, this focus on the one thing and the one action, the one time is actually going to help you in the long run. And it's a common thing because most people overestimate what they can do in 1 year and they underestimate what they can do in 10 years. So if we're thinking long term, we can use the future to our advantage and we can avoid being short-sighted and being that donkey like you were just talking about.
Exactly. Okay, so Sivers gives us like a bit of a lens or a filter through which to make a decision about what's worth doing. And he says you got to ask yourself 3 questions. 1 is what makes you happy. 2 is what's smart, as in what's good for you in the long term. And 3 is what is useful to others. So he says a good thing that's worth doing is happy, smart, and useful.
And we run into some issues when just even one of them's missing from this awesome trio. I really love this. So let's say you've got something that's smart and useful, but you leave out the happiness. So this is really the stereotypical of just doing what society wants you to do, maybe going to school, getting the best grades, getting into the most obvious, hardest to get into industries, whether it be law or medicine, and going out there and making lots of money. Yes, you're useful to society because you've got these rare and valuable skills. You're very smart because you're cultivating that, but you're not going to be very happy. So in this sense, this is missing that link and would be not necessarily be the best thing to do.
Another thing you can do is you can be happy and smart, but you forget about the useful side of it. So that's like your stereotypical lifestyle designer, the hustler or the self-help addict, the silver bullet chaser. They're always looking for ways to improve their life. They're looking for ways to be happy, but they're always looking for passive income hacks. They're not actually trying to be genuinely beneficial and useful to society, so they end up get caught selling sups. Not thinking of anyone in particular.
Yes, you are, mate. We were there as well, so we've all been there. And the third one, if you got happy and useful, but not very smart, this is very stereotypical of charity volunteers. I've probably been in all 3 situations at some stage in my life. I'd say this is the traveling phase where you're just having loads of fun. Actually, that wasn't very useful. I was just happy. In this context, happy and useful. You might have your stereotypical charity volunteers, right? So they might have got together a really expensive university degree, loaded themselves up with debt, but spend their whole entire lives finding exotic, impoverished locations to dig roofs and actually donate to charity all their time. And they're not really doing anything for their own personal finances.
Yeah, so the problem here is obviously they're going to be happy living this lifestyle. Obviously, it's useful because they are helping out the underprivileged, but it's not really smart. If they were doing something smart, they could actually, rather than going and digging wells, which someone could do for $5 or $10 an hour, they could go and get a job at a big corporate in the city and make $200 an hour. They can keep whatever they need to live and donate, 90% of what they're doing to dig. I'm just trying to do some quick maths. They could dig 18 times as many wells just by donating that money to someone else who can do it. So happy plus useful, it's not bad, obviously. It's a good thing, but it's still not smart. We need to find the holy trinity, I guess. We need to find happy and useful and smart. I've got one mate. I'm pretty sure he doesn't listen, so I could mention names. I'll try not to. But he said
What's
to
his
me,
name?
He said to me, you know him, someone you know. He said to me recently that I'm still like in the learning phase. So he said from 25 to 30, he said from 25 to 30, I'm going to do all I can to learn everything, and then from 30 onwards, that's when I'm going to start creating and giving back. But I'm calling bullshit on that. Because that's really it's a good excuse to delay doing anything for 3 or 4 years, just saying, oh yeah, when I get to 30, I'll start doing stuff. But also by actually doing stuff, you'll actually learn better rather than just thinking, oh, I'll just learn. And then when I hit 30, I'll start doing stuff, which I'm calling BS on that.
Yeah, I think that's a good call, calling BS on that. And we can all go down into these loops of finding inspiration, looking for those things that mentally stimulate you, breathe it all in, and being big readers like us two, or everyone listening right now, probably loves reading books, and you can just get in that trap of just going reading. But that's only one half of the equation. I think like the antidote to pretty much any issue in the world is reading books. Part 1. Part 2 is doing shit.
Doing shit. Yeah, exactly.
Because if you're just reading, then nothing's going to happen. And if you're just doing shit, you're not probably informing yourself properly.
Yeah, exactly. Sivers, in a very poetic way, he says that inspiration means obviously mental stimulation, but he says inspiration, to inspire, means to breathe in. He says you got to breathe out as well. He says like all these inspirational ideas, they're really meaningless until you breathe out. And he's saying as in breathe out, as in apply that to your own work. Now, your work could be your work in the office. It could be your work on your side hustle. It could be your work as in your personal relationships, how you act in the world. Whatever you're doing, you need to apply this stuff to the real world. So learning, breathing in, inspiring, that's good, but you actually got to breathe out and start doing some of this shit.
One of the common issues a lot of people will bring up is, oh yeah, but I haven't found my passion yet. So it's actually really hard to go out there and do stuff just because I'm not stimulated towards anything in particular.
Yeah, I haven't found my passion yet. It's an easy one, but I think Sivers is right when he says passion, it's not something you find, but it's something that you cultivate. It's something that over time develops. As we, the book So Good They Can't Ignore You, the passion hypothesis, always looking, what's my passion, is really a bit of a flawed thinking. Really, your passion comes from the things that you get good at, the things that you do repeatedly and start to enjoy more over time.
Yeah, it might be very small things that over time you realize, oh, that's interesting. It gets you stimulated a little bit. And then from there, you might cultivate and just do a bit more in that direction. Or the ultimate way of finding out what you're passionate about from the Sivers motto is actually going out and finding what scares you the most, because at least that's just going to get you excited.
Yeah, he says say yes to everything. The title of this book is Hell Yeah or No, but he's saying at the very start, say yes to everything. If you read a blog post about programming and it tickles you in ways that you haven't been tickled before, then go and program. Like, just test it out for a few hours, see if you like it or not. Or if you find an online course that sounds interesting, learn about it, have a play around with it, then maybe it might become your new calling. You never know. He's saying say yes to everything. Go to more events, read more books, listen to more podcasts, try out new things. Just say yes to anything that comes your way and see where it takes you.
I remember early days on the podcast, we were just saying yes to any opportunity we had, particularly when it came to interviews, because what Sivers is saying here, like anything that scares you a little bit, it's probably got a bit of growth in there. So we were just saying yes to everyone, and we were really scared and a bit nervous before every interview. But
and I remember the first one we did, which took us a long time to get, by the way. It was about 7 months before someone finally said yes to us. But I was scared for the whole day leading up to it, just scared for the 20, 30-minute interview that we did.
Absolutely. And over time, how many interviews have we done now? 40, 50?
I think more.
30?
Somewhere between 60 to 70, I reckon.
Okay.
Yeah.
And how nervous were you for the last one?
Yeah, definitely nowhere near as nervous. Definitely like that period got shorter. Like it was probably like 6 hours at start, and the second one was like 3 hours, and it was like 1 hour, and now it's just sort of like not even that interested anymore. Where it's just like the fear or the nerves sort of aren't there anymore. And he says it's really a good thing to do is do things that scare you, because really once you do it, then you're not scared of it anymore. So it's a good way to force yourself to grow.
So you'll probably hit that stage now. We're still open to interviews, but it's going to be very high caliber of person, and we've switched, like Sivers is saying here, to the mode where you go from just saying yes to absolutely everything, but then eventually hit a point where you start saying no to everything, and prioritizing what you say no to becomes more important.
Yeah, he says once you find, you've said yes to everything, and then once you find something extra rewarding, you switch strategies to focusing all your energies on this one thing. So you're not just casually dabbling in it anymore. Strike while it's hot. Be a bit of a freak, he says. Give it everything you've got. So put all of your focus onto this one thing and say no to a whole bunch of other stuff.
So our strategies have changed now, and we need to start saying no to things. And this means, in some contexts, quitting something you might love as a way of bringing something new and different into your life.
Yeah, he says if there's something that you've been doing for a long time, and if you're enjoying it, obviously that's a good thing, but sometimes you might need to painfully cut something out of your life. So you need to almost release yourself or free yourself by getting rid of something that's taken up a lot of your life. It actually leaves a bit more space for you to commit to the next big opportunity that comes along instead. So it's not going to be easy, but sometimes you might just have to look at one of those hobbies and think, where is this taking me? How does this game end? Maybe I've got to free myself from this and be open to some new possibilities and some new growth.
So when we're saying yes to everything in our lives, we're filling it up to the absolute brim. Once it's filled to the brim, then we don't necessarily need to be bringing more stuff in. So the filter that Derek Sivers uses at this stage is, if anything comes your way, the feeling that qualifiers, bring something into your life is this. Hell yeah, that would be awesome. And if you don't get that feeling inside of you, then this is when you should be saying no.
Exactly. So this is probably where the nuance comes in. Everyone just watch the TED Talk or listen to the Tim Ferriss interview and just thinks, oh yeah, hell yeah or no. So I got to just, if it's not hell yeah, I say no.
Say no and just hang on the couch.
Just do nothing. But of course the nuance is, well, at first you got to say yes to everything. It's when you start to kill it in one particular area, that's when you start to say hell yeah or no. So that's when we start saying yes to less. If things aren't feeling awesome, if things aren't, you think, oh, this is going to be a massive opportunity that's going to take me to the next step, that's when you got to start saying no to all those mediocre offers that you're really half-hearted about.
Every episode we do our best to go to Steelman, the book, put the best possible version that we can to everyone, because every book we choose, we know there'll be some people out there who it absolutely resonates with and it's the perfect book for them. But sometimes in the Steelman, one of us will actually not really enjoy the book and actually give it like a 1 or 2 out of 10, whereas the other person might get it an 8 out of 10. But if you want to be in on what we give every book we do out of 10, then sign up to our email list. Every month we'll give you a review and our ratings out of 10 and plus a little summary of what we've done that month. Go to whatyou'lllearn.com/email.